In the beginning, there was no sky and no ground, no mountains, no oceans, no fire, no wind. There was only endless quiet darkness stretching in every direction, like a breath held forever. And within that vast stillness lived the Great Spirit, unseen yet present, powerful yet gentle, older than time itself. The Great Spirit did not live in a place, because there was no place to live in. The Great Spirit simply was, existing as awareness, thought, and intention, floating within the endless nothingness. And for a long time, or perhaps for no time at all, the Great Spirit listened to the silence and felt it deeply. The silence was calm, but it was also lonely, and in that loneliness a thought slowly formed. Not a loud thought, not a sudden idea, but a soft feeling, like a heartbeat beginning for the very first time. The Great Spirit wondered what it would be like if there was something instead of nothing. Something that could move and grow and change. Something that could reflect beauty and carry stories. Something that could feel warmth and cold, joy and struggle. Something that could remember and dream. And so the Great Spirit breathed out a long, gentle breath, and with that breath intention flowed outward, and the darkness began to stir. Not in fear, but in curiosity, as if it too was waking up. From that breath came the first light. Not a blinding light, but a soft glow spreading slowly, like dawn touching the edge of the world. And as the light spread, the Great Spirit began to shape thought into form, imagining space, imagining direction, imagining above and below. And with this imagining, the idea of the sky was born, a vast open expanse where light could travel and where movement could exist. And the Great Spirit lifted the light upward, forming the first sky, wide, deep, and endless. Below the sky, the Great Spirit imagined balance, a place that could hold weight and give support, a place where things could rest and grow and change. And from this imagining, the idea of the earth was born. But the earth was not yet solid. It was only a promise waiting to be shaped. And so the Great Spirit reached deeper into its own essence and gathered the materials of creation, not stone or water yet, but energy, memory, and purpose, woven together like threads. As the Great Spirit worked, it was not alone. For within the Great Spirit lived many aspects, many voices, many expressions of the same source. And from these expressions came the first helpers, the first beings of thought and force, often called the elders or the ancient ones, spirits of wind, water, fire, and stone. Each one a reflection of the Great Spirit itself. Each one carrying a different responsibility. And when they came into awareness, they did not speak with words, but with understanding, and they knew they were meant to help shape what was to come. The spirit of wind moved first, swirling through the empty space, carrying motion and breath, teaching the new world how to move and change. The spirit of fire followed, bringing warmth, energy, and transformation, teaching the world how to glow and how to renew. The spirit of water flowed next, smooth and patient, bringing depth, emotion, and life, teaching the world how to feel and remember. And last came the spirit of stone, slow, steady, and strong, bringing form, stability, and endurance, teaching the world how to hold together. Together with the Great Spirit, these ancient forces began the work of creation, shaping the raw promise of earth into something real and meaningful. But creation was not instant. It was a careful process guided by respect and balance. For the Great Spirit understood that anything created without balance would not last. And so each movement was considered, each change measured, not by time, but by harmony. The Great Spirit began by forming the land, lifting great masses upward to become mountains, strong and ancient, carving valleys where rivers would one day flow, pressing plains flat where life could spread freely. The Stone Spirit guided this shaping, ensuring strength beneath the surface, while the Water Spirit traced invisible paths, preparing future rivers, lakes, and oceans. And as the land took form, the Wind Spirit danced across it, smoothing rough edges and carrying whispers of what was still to come. When the land was ready, the Great Spirit turned attention to the waters, calling them forth to fill the low places, to move around the earth, embracing the land without overwhelming it. Oceans spread wide, reflecting the sky above, while rivers began their long journeys from mountains to sea, carrying stories from one place to another. And wherever water touched land, the Great Spirit felt a deep satisfaction, because water and earth together promised life. Then the Great Spirit looked upon the sky, which was still empty except for light, and imagined rhythm and guidance. And so the sun was formed, placed carefully to warm the earth without burning it, to rise and fall in a steady pattern, teaching the world about time and cycles. And the moon followed, quieter, gentler, reflecting the sun and guiding tides, dreams, and night journeys. And stars were scattered across the sky like memories, tiny points of light reminding all beings that even in darkness there is guidance. As the world grew more complete, the Great Spirit felt a new desire, not just to shape the world, but to fill it with life that could experience it. And so attention turned once again inward, drawing from the deepest essence the spark of living spirit. And with that spark, the Great Spirit began to create the first living beings, starting with the smallest forms, plants that rooted into the earth and reached toward the sky. Grasses, trees, flowers, moss, each one carrying a quiet strength, teaching patience, resilience, and growth. Plants spread across the land, changing the color of the world, softening the stone, feeding the soil, preparing the earth for the next stage of creation. And the Great Spirit watched as forests formed and fields bloomed and deserts waited quietly, holding their own beauty and lessons. And seeing this, the Great Spirit smiled, not with a face, but with a feeling that flowed through everything. Next came the animals, each created with purpose and respect. Some were swift, teaching speed, awareness, and freedom. Others were strong, teaching endurance, courage, and responsibility. Some moved through water, some through air, some across land, each one filling a role, maintaining balance, carrying wisdom in their instincts. And as they moved and lived, the world became alive with sound, motion, and story. Yet even with all this beauty, the Great Spirit sensed something missing, not a flaw, but an opportunity. Something that could bridge all parts of creation. Something that could observe, reflect, choose, and learn. Something that could carry responsibility and memory. And so the idea of humans began to form, not as rulers, but as caretakers, not as owners, but as relatives of the earth. The Great Spirit shaped humans carefully, giving them bodies made from the earth itself, breath borrowed from the wind, warmth from fire, water flowing in their veins, and spirit drawn directly from the Great Spirit. And with this gift came freedom, the freedom to choose, to create, to protect, or to destroy. And knowing this, the Great Spirit felt both hope and concern, for freedom was a powerful gift. Before humans were fully awakened, the Great Spirit gathered the ancient forces and shared a silent understanding. Humans would need guidance, not control, but teaching. Stories, symbols, dreams, and signs would be placed throughout the world. Mountains would teach patience. Rivers would teach persistence. Animals would teach balance and community. And the sky would remind humans of their place within the greater whole. And so humans opened their eyes for the first time, standing on the earth beneath the sky, feeling the wind on their skin, hearing water nearby. And in that moment, they did not feel separate from the world. They felt connected, as if everything around them was family. And the Great Spirit watched quietly, knowing that the true story of creation was not finished. It was only beginning. For creation was not meant to be perfect or unchanging. It was meant to grow, to face challenges, to learn, and to remember. And the Great Spirit understood that humans would forget this connection at times. They would struggle and make mistakes. But the stories of creation would remain, carried through generations, spoken around fires, painted on stone, sung in ceremonies, reminding them of where they came from and who they truly are. And so the Great Spirit stepped back, not disappearing, but becoming part of everything. Watching through the eyes of animals, whispering through wind, flowing through water, resting in stone, waiting patiently for humans to listen again and remember that the earth is not just a place to live, but a living being itself, born from intention, balance, and love. As humans began their journey upon the earth, the Great Spirit did not guide them with commands or rules spoken aloud. Instead, guidance came through experience, through dreams, through the behavior of animals, through the changing seasons, and through the quiet voice within that humans would later call intuition. At first, humans lived simply, moving with the land, taking only what was needed, giving thanks for every gift, and understanding that every action carried consequence. They spoke to the rivers before crossing them, thanked the animals after a hunt, and honored the trees before cutting them, because they felt the presence of the Great Spirit in all things. In those early times, humans did not see themselves as separate from creation. They knew the earth as a mother, the sky as a father, the sun as a life-giver, and the moon as a guardian of rest and renewal. Days flowed gently, marked not by clocks, but by light and shadow. Seasons taught patience, preparation, and release. And stories were shared not as entertainment, but as living memory, connecting each generation to the first moments of creation. But as time passed and human numbers grew, curiosity grew with them. Curiosity led to innovation, and innovation slowly led to imbalance. Not because growth itself was wrong, but because memory began to fade. Some humans started to believe the world existed for them alone, forgetting that they were only one voice in a much larger chorus. Forests were cleared without gratitude. Animals were taken without respect. Rivers were crossed without listening. And the land began to change in response. The Great Spirit felt this shift, not as anger, but as concern. Because imbalance does not punish. It teaches. And so the Great Spirit allowed consequences to arise. Droughts reminded humans of water's value. Storms reminded them of humility. Illness reminded them of care for one another. And through these challenges, stories grew deeper, carrying warnings, lessons, and hope. Elders rose among humans, those who listened closely to the world and remembered the old ways. They became storytellers, healers, and guides, helping their people understand that hardship was not abandonment, but a call to remember. One such story tells of a time when humans argued over land, drawing lines where none had existed, claiming ownership, forgetting that the earth cannot be owned, only shared. As conflict grew, the animals withdrew, the rivers changed course, and the land grew silent. Sensing this loss, the elders gathered and sought guidance. They fasted, prayed, and listened, until the Great Spirit spoke, not with words, but with a vision, showing humans standing alone on a broken land, surrounded by echoes of what once was. And the message was clear. Separation leads to emptiness. Moved by this vision, humans began the long work of restoration, replanting trees, sharing food, honoring agreements. And slowly, balance returned. Though never exactly as before. Because once knowledge is gained, innocence cannot be fully reclaimed. Yet wisdom can grow from experience. And so humanity learned that creation is not a single event finished in the past. It is an ongoing responsibility lived every day through choice. The Great Spirit also taught through animals, each animal carrying a story. The eagle taught perspective and courage, reminding humans to rise above small conflicts and see the larger picture. The wolf taught community, loyalty, and cooperation, showing that survival comes through unity. The bear taught strength paired with rest and introspection. The turtle taught patience and endurance, carrying the world steadily upon its back in some traditions. And the trickster figures, such as the raven or coyote, taught through humor and chaos, revealing that mistakes can be teachers and that laughter is part of wisdom. These stories were not myths in the sense of fiction. They were maps for living, frameworks to understand the world and the human place within it. Passed orally from generation to generation, changing slightly with each telling, yet always carrying the same core truth, that all life is connected and that the Great Spirit flows through everything. As civilizations rose and fell, the story of the Great Spirit and the creation of Earth adapted to new languages, landscapes, and experiences. Some spoke of the Great Spirit as male, others as female, others as beyond such distinctions. Some saw creation emerging from water, others from sound, breath, or thought. Yet beneath these variations, the heart of the story remained constant. Creation began with intention, balance, and relationship. When new cultures arrived, when borders shifted, and traditions were challenged, the creation stories became acts of resistance and survival, holding identity together when everything else was taken. Elders whispered them in secret. Parents taught them to children at night. And artists encoded them into songs, carvings, and ceremonies, ensuring that even when voices were silenced, the story of the Great Spirit would endure. With time, scholars and outsiders began to listen, writing down these stories, studying them, sometimes misunderstanding them by trying to fit them into rigid categories. But even so, the stories continued to live. Because their power does not come from accuracy of record, but from meaning felt in the heart when heard spoken aloud by a human voice. The Great Spirit creation story also speaks deeply to modern struggles. In a world facing environmental crisis, climate change, and disconnection, the idea that the earth is alive and deserving of respect feels increasingly urgent. The myth reminds us that humanity was not created to dominate, but to participate. Not to consume endlessly, but to maintain balance. And that forgetting this truth leads to suffering, not because the Great Spirit seeks punishment, but because imbalance naturally creates instability. Many people today, regardless of background, feel drawn to these ancient teachings, sensing that something important was lost in the rush toward progress. The creation story offers a different definition of advancement, one measured not by accumulation, but by harmony. Not by speed, but by sustainability. Not by control, but by relationship. Artists, writers, and filmmakers continue to draw inspiration from the Great Spirit myth, reimagining creation through novels, paintings, music, and cinema. Often without naming the source directly, yet carrying its essence. Themes of interconnectedness, sacred nature, and spiritual responsibility appear again and again, because these ideas speak to something deep within the human psyche, something older than modern society, something remembered rather than learned. Even science, in its own way, echoes parts of the ancient story. Speaking of a universe born from energy expanding into form. Of matter formed from stardust. Of ecosystems reliant on delicate balance. While the language differs, the wonder remains. And in this meeting point between myth and science, many find a renewed sense of awe, realizing that ancient wisdom and modern knowledge do not have to oppose each other. They can inform and enrich one another. The Great Spirit creation story does not demand belief. It invites reflection. It does not insist on a single truth. It offers a lens through which to view existence, asking listeners to consider their relationship with the world and with each other. To ask what kind of ancestors they wish to become, what stories future generations will tell about them, and whether those stories will speak of care or neglect. As the story continues through time, the Great Spirit remains present, not as a distant ruler, but as a living presence. Felt in moments of stillness, in acts of kindness, in respect shown to the land, in the quiet understanding that life is precious, fragile, and interconnected. And that creation is not finished. It is unfolding with every choice made by every being. As the generations continued, the story of the Great Spirit and the creation of Earth became more than a memory of beginnings. It became a guide for how to live within the world. The myth taught that creation was an act of care, and that to live well meant to act with the same care in every moment. This idea shaped ceremonies, laws, relationships, and even silence, because silence itself was seen as a way to listen to the Great Spirit still speaking through the world. One of the most powerful ideas within the story is that creation came from intention rather than force. The Great Spirit did not conquer the darkness, but gently transformed it. This teaches that true strength does not need domination. It needs understanding and patience. In a world where power is often measured by control, this lesson quietly challenges listeners to rethink what it means to be strong. Another deep symbol lies in the balance of elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. None were superior. None were complete on their own. Each depended on the others to sustain life. This balance mirrors human existence, reminding people that emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual aspects must be honored together. Neglecting one leads to imbalance and suffering. The myth suggests that wellness is not found in extremes, but in harmony. The creation of humans from earth, breath, fire, and water carries profound meaning. It teaches that humans are not separate from nature, but expressions of it. When people harm the earth, they harm themselves. When they heal the land, they also heal their communities. This understanding shaped practices of respect, gratitude, and restraint, values that modern society is now struggling to relearn. The story also speaks to responsibility. The Great Spirit gave humans freedom, knowing it carried risk. This reflects a deep truth about existence, that meaning comes not from perfection, but from choice. The myth does not promise an easy world. It promises a meaningful one, where mistakes become teachers and growth comes through awareness. Trickster figures within the wider creation tradition symbolize the unpredictable nature of life. They remind listeners that chaos is not always negative. Sometimes it disrupts harmful patterns and forces new understanding. Laughter in these stories is sacred, because it breaks ego and opens space for humility, a necessary quality for learning. The cultural impact of the Great Spirit creation story extends far beyond its origins. It has influenced environmental movements, indigenous rights, philosophies of sustainability, and modern spiritual practices. Concepts like living in balance, honoring the earth, and seeing nature as sacred are increasingly present in global conversations, even when the myth itself is not directly referenced. In literature, themes of a living world and interconnected fate appear in countless stories. Fantasy worlds where land responds to moral action. Characters who must restore balance rather than win battles. And narratives that emphasize stewardship over conquest. These ideas trace their roots back to ancient creation stories like this one. Visual art has also carried the myth forward. Paintings of sky and earth united. Animals surrounding humans. Symbols of circles, spirals, and the four directions. All echo the original creation framework. Music inspired by nature, rhythm, ceremony, and heartbeat mirrors the original idea that creation itself was a kind of song breathed into existence. In film and modern media, the influence appears in stories that portray the planet as sentient or sacred. In narratives warning of environmental collapse due to human arrogance. And in characters who rediscover ancient wisdom to heal a broken world. Even when audiences do not consciously recognize the source, the emotional response suggests something familiar, something remembered at a deeper level. What makes the Great Spirit creation story endure is not just its beauty, but its adaptability. It does not belong to one era. It speaks equally to ancient hunters, modern city dwellers, scientists, artists, and seekers. It asks universal questions. Where did we come from? What is our place here? And how should we live with one another and with the world? In a time when many feel disconnected, overwhelmed, and uncertain, this myth offers grounding. It reminds listeners that they are part of a much larger story, one that began long before them and will continue long after them. It encourages humility without diminishing worth, belonging without possession, and purpose without domination. As the story comes full circle, the Great Spirit remains not above, but within. Within the earth beneath our feet. Within the air we breathe. Within the water that sustains us. Within the fire that warms and transforms. The Great Spirit lives in attention, in respect, in the pause before action, and in the choice to care. The creation of earth was not a single moment frozen in the past. It is an ongoing process, renewed each day through human actions. Every time a tree is planted, a river is protected, a story is shared, or kindness is chosen, creation continues. The Great Spirit does not demand worship. It invites relationship. And perhaps that is why this myth still resonates. Because it does not place humanity at the center as masters, nor at the bottom as insignificant, but within a living web where every being matters, where every action echoes, and where meaning is found not in owning the world, but in belonging to it. As the ancient storytellers would remind us, the earth remembers. It remembers how it was created, with care and balance and intention. And it responds to how it is treated. The Great Spirit still listens, not for prayers spoken loudly, but for actions lived quietly. And so the story does not truly end. It waits to be lived again. Each time someone listens to the land. Each time someone chooses balance over excess. And each time someone remembers that creation is not behind us. It is happening now.